Rev it up and welcome to Cars Yeah, show number 2319. Today I'm talking to one of the most prolific artists in the field of automotive art, so be prepared to be inspired.
This is Cars Yeah, where you'll enjoy interviews with inspiring automotive enthusiasts. Mark Green is here to provide you with a fuel injection of automotive inspiration. So get in, sit down, buckle up, and get ready for a wild ride here on Cars Yeah.
Hello, inspiring automotive enthusiasts, and welcome to Cars Yeah. Today, I'm in Henderson, Nevada, with a very special and creative guest by the name of Kenny Youngblood. His friends call him Blood. Kenny, welcome to Cars Yeah. Do you have any gear, and are you ready to release the clutch?
Oh, Mark, it's great to be your guest, and let's roll.
All right, we're going to have some fun. We'll get the paintbrushes ready. Now, before I introduce you properly and we talk about your career and what you've done, what's one little thing that maybe people don't know about Kenny Youngblood?
Well, I would say there's a couple of things. I'm, of course, most well-known for my artistic endeavors over the years. However, my personal achievement that I'm most proudest of in motorsports is actually being a crew chief on a Formula One tunnel boat racing team back in the 80s, and we went from rookies in about 86 to winning the national championship in 1990. This was professional boat racing circuit, and that was my proudest achievement. But other than that, we've just been blessed to do a lot of things. The other little known fact maybe that I've had a counseling ministry for 46 years where I help people with a relationship, marriage, parenting, and other issues. It's a Christian-based ministry.
Oh, wow. Oh, very, very cool. Well, I love it. Sounds wonderful. As a kid, I grew up down in the San Diego area, and we would go to the Mission Bay hydroplane races every year.
Yeah.
It was a big deal to go down there, and we had friends with boats, so we could sit out in the bay and watch those things go by. Just utter amazement. And of course, up here in the Pacific Northwest, they have those races up in Seattle. Yeah, that is gnarly stuff. As if racing cars isn't gnarly and scary, boat racers, that's another league in and of itself.
Yeah, it's scarier because you can't drown on asphalt, but you sure can out there on that water. So that was, I think, one of the things that made that kind of racing the most exciting thing I've ever done is the danger involved. It's just inherent, but it was really rewarding.
Well, very cool. And we'll talk a little bit later about your ministry and helping people through counseling, which I think is really, really awesome and important. But first, let me give you an introduction here, Blood, as your friends call you. Kenny Youngblood is the most prolific automotive artist in the field and its most significant pioneer. He started drawing slingshot fuel dragsters in 1960 on the kitchen table. And if you're into motorsports, no doubt you know his artwork. In his early 20s, he built and drove fuel dragsters of his own. He talked about his time spent with boat racing, of course. His clients were the who's who of racing, and his talents were put on many of the great funny cars of the 70s, including the Snake and Mongoose, the Blue Max, Black Magic, and dozens more. God, I built models of those things. Who thought I'd be talking to the guy that created the visuals for them? Kenny Youngblood, or I should say Kenny's Blood Did It signature, graced every form of racing, including Reno Air Racers and Danny Sullivan's Miller Beer-sponsored Spin and Win Indy car. How cool is that? He created the graphic design for ZZ Top's Eliminator album cover, car, and Dale Earnhardt's Wrangler Monte Carlo race car, including the /number 3. Now, that's cool. Kenny also paints race car portraits, which are sought after by collectors around the world. We'll be back in just a moment, but first a word from our sponsors. They keep the petrol in the tank here, or the paint in the tubes, I guess I should say. We'll be right back, so buckle up. Years ago, when it was time to renew my collector car insurance policy, my carrier's rates went up. Way up, but my usage was the same and I never made a claim. I didn't even have a ticket. So what's with that? So I turned to American Collectors Insurance. Has your collector car insurance recently raised your rates for no good reason? Tired of paying an annual membership fee? Then it's time to look around and call American Collectors Insurance. I shopped around, I asked friends for recommendations, and found a winner that I can trust. And boy, I'm glad I did. I saved hundreds of dollars every year and slept better at night knowing my baby was properly insured. American Collectors Insurance have been protecting vehicles since 1976. They provided me with an agreed value insurance policy backed by their history of taking great care of their clients. What could be better than that? So give them a call and ask for a quote today. 866-ACI-YEAH. That's 866-224-9324. And protect the ones you love like I did with American Collectors Insurance. Classic car insurance designed by collectors for collectors. For several years now, you've heard me talk about Linkage Magazine. I've been a subscriber since the start. Their talented and creative team brings you a spectacular publication and website that shares the automotive passion from a worldwide perspective. Linkage is about driving, restoring, collecting, and first-hand experience at collector car auctions and more. They bring you real-world values plus rational, experienced opinions on the current markets. They cover the automotive world and the people who share our passions. And Linkage Magazine has grown, mailing you 6 issues annually. Join me on this journey with Linkage. They're geared for the automotive life. You can subscribe at linkagemag.com. So, Kenny, I want to dive back in time first to walk our listeners through how you got here. Now, I know that back in 1960, you were drawing slingshot dragsters. I used to do the same thing in the 60s, but your mom gave you a little motivation and said, you know what, you're going to make money doing this someday. Let's go back in time. I mean, how did this artwork evolve into an actual career? Because it is hard to be a successful artist.
Yeah, it is. I was blessed to be born into a family of artists, Mark. My mom, my dad, my uncle were all very talented painters. However, they did traditional subjects. They painted landscapes and portraits and still lifes and things. And whereas I was always interested in mechanical things. So as a kid, I'm drawing cars and boats and planes and trains. And as a teen, was introduced to drag racing through classmates' dad took us out to the San Gabriel drag strip in 1958, I think. And boy, that just blew me away. And I fell in love with drag racing and ended up building a couple of my own cars out of high school and racing those. At the time, I still liked drawing cars, and the only place you could get paid to do that was in Detroit, designing cars. And so I thought, well, that's where I'll end up going. And so I was actually taking some art classes at Pasadena City College and preparing to go to Art Center School in Los Angeles, which was the premier automotive art design school. But along the way, I'm drag racing. I ended up lettering my own cars and painting a car for a friend of mine named Gary Messenger out of Pasadena that ran a little dragster like I did. And the fellow that painted his car saw the lettering that I did on it and called me up and asked me if I would go to work for him as a sign artist. And so I didn't really plan it, but there I was doing lettering on cars. This was what I call during the great funny car boom of the 70s, when funny cars first made the scene, and there was literally hundreds of them around the country, and they needed nice-looking graphics. And I was more of an artist than a sign painter, and so I enjoyed coming up with graphic designs for the cars. And so that's how it really started, and certainly took off big time from there during the 70s. We were busy both. I had 2 jobs for a while, Mark. I would go down to the studio and design graphics, drawings, and do a lot of sponsor proposals. This was BC, before computers. Everything was hand-drawn. And so we would do a lot of sponsor proposals and paint schemes, and I'd send them to clients all over the country. And then head down in the afternoon to the paint shop and work on airbrushing and hand lettering on the funny cars. And was doing that. I realized I had to make a decision there. And as much as I still enjoy the hand painting and the smell of Bondo in the morning, I knew that the studio was a better use of my abilities, and so some other sign artists kind of took over for me, and we spent more time at the studio and on the easel.
Much of your art, when I look at it at first, I think I'm looking at a photograph, and then I stop and go, wait a minute, that's a painting. Has the realistic version of your art, and I know you do a lot of different things, has that always been your forte, what you always strive to do?
Yeah, and sometimes that's a curse. I mean, I really enjoy looking at paintings that are looser, that are more stylized, and like the work of Tom Fritz, the more painterly artwork. But it just seems like, for me, just the longer I do it, the tighter I get, the more realistic stuff. And I've kind of perfected the art over the years. The most common question I'm asked is, how long did it take you to do that? And number one, I don't really know, because I rarely work on a piece from start to finish. I'll work on it here and there. And I perfected cheating, if you want to put it that way. The pieces are all hand painted, but I use every trick in the book to get there. I'm not a purist in that sense. I tell folks you can use a hand saw or a skill saw to build a house, and the house is going to come out the same, but one of them's going to take a lot longer and be a lot more work. And so I use every trick I can to get there, and which brings me to my one of the most influential people in my life, which I've never really thought about before, kind of took it for granted. But my mother was not only a very talented artist herself, but she had a tremendous love for art, and was the best teacher I could ever have had. And she just knew all kinds of tricks for doing things, and I don't know where she learned them all, but to this day, every time I pick up a pen or a pencil, I'm using the things that she taught me.
Oh, how wonderful. That's a fantastic segue into that question I always ask people. Tom Fritz, you mentioned, he's been a guest on the show here. I love his artwork. In fact, I send thank you notes out to all my guests who've been on the show, and I use the stamps that the USPS picked up of his pony cars, muscle cars that they're doing right now, and the ones before. I bought a whole bunch of them, which is fun. People always enjoy seeing those. Yeah, I had Scott Jacobs, who's an automotive painter. He also does a lot of still lifes and things. And when he was on the show, he talked about how he became successful in terms of money. And he said, well, I started painting things that people wanted. And that was things that were more realistic, because a lot of people are challenged with modern art, let's say art that is conceptual, or even art that doesn't look like what you and I might call a traditional picture. Did you find that true in the art that you're doing? People wanted to see more realistic things of drag racers and cars and people?
Yeah, that's true. And on top of that, a lot of my, especially drag racing paintings, I strive to do the painting where the viewer's looking at the car from an angle that would be difficult, if not impossible, for a photographer to take. And then I use artistic license, and will often do night shots, because you get the flames up, and then I use the flames as the only source of light in the painting. And that increases the dramatic effect of the painting, and the fact that it's at some weird angle or in your face where a photographer couldn't really get the photo. For example, I don't think I sent you images, but paintings like Art Christmas Hustler, I did a painting of that where you're kind of looking over his shoulder as he's taken off from the starting line, which would really be pretty impossible for a photographer to get. I actually shot some reference photos in the NHRA Museum of the car. I'm standing up on a ladder looking down on it from the back, and all I needed was just kind of the basic shape of the car. The lighting, of course, in the museum was terrible, but then I take and create all the background, and again made the fire the only source of light in the painting. So, yeah.
I love it. I know that you're a member of the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame. You were Hot Rod Magazine's 100 Most Influential People. Wow. Daryl Starbird Designer Hall of Fame, Route 66 Rendezvous Hall of Fame, New England Drag Racing Hall of Fame. I mean, you are so well known and you're so well connected. How did the connections with all these incredible, talented racers, and even in the case of ZZ Top's, the album cover, we all know that, of course, how did you get to know all these people? Was it just a growing trend of the cars you painted and people go, oh, he can do it for you? Right place, right time?
No, not exactly. That's a great question, because it brings me to The second most influential person in my life was a gentleman named Bob Cashler. And if you're into motorsports, you probably have never heard the name of because was a very reclusive kind of guy. And yet he was very influential in my life in that I met him in probably 1970 or so. Was introduced to him by the gentleman that Don Kirby that owned the paint shop where I worked, and he says, "You got to meet my friend Bob." He says, "He's like you. He's an artist, but he does other things. He gets people sponsors." Well, the word marketing hadn't been invented yet, Mark, and so he was just a guy that got people sponsors. And I met with Bob. He told me that he wanted to put together a creative group to service motorsports under one roof. And which was a great concept, and he wanted to put together a one-stop shop where a racer could go for a proposal drawing or rendering, a sponsorship proposal, photographs, whatever was necessary in the creative end of racing. And so we rented a building down in Long Beach, California, and he invited me to be the in-house artist, so to speak. And the cool thing was I was just getting started, Mark, and I knew all of the racers because I was a fan from a kid, but they certainly didn't know me. However, Bob knew them. He had worked with Inky Thompson and Danny Gaius and Parnelli Jones and tons of the racers, Snake and Mongoose, and he knew them all. And so he began introducing me to them. And racing is a small world, as you know. And the word gets out real quick. And so pretty soon the word gets around that you can do these things. And so, but I thank Bob for that. And he was really a mentor to me. And he's still kicking. I talked to him yesterday. He's in an assisted living home, but still actively pursuing sponsors. And it's interesting because we call the business Racing Graphis, Graphis, because the word graphics in German is Graphis. And so he wanted to tie that in.
I love it. I like to always talk a bit about challenges, and obviously most careers have some challenges in them, but the most important part of those challenges is they teach valuable lessons. Maybe not so fun to go through the situation, but in the hindsight, could be very helpful. Is there something like that you went through in your business?
I have to think on that. There might be something more specific. Usually the biggest challenge was just finding enough hours in the day to get done what we needed to.
Yeah.
What we needed to do. I can't complain there.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, especially when it comes to artwork. And, that leads me to another question. There's a lot of young people these days that would love to get into the field of art. What would be your best advice for someone that wants to go into that field as a career?
Well, that's a great question. And I tell young people, whether it's art or whatever their interests are, I tell them to follow their passion. Just follow your passion. Do what you really love doing. Like me sitting at the kitchen table drawing dragsters in 1960, and my mom saying someday you'll get paid for that, and me thinking she's crazy. Who would ever do that? But just a short few years later, that's exactly what happened. And so that's the most important thing. I also tell young people interested in art that to pursue that. And there'll always be, I believe, a place, I hope, for actual hand-painted artwork, fine art. And if that's what you want to do, you keep doing it, and there'll always be a market for that. However, in the field of art, commercially, 99.99% of everything out there is all digital now. And so I do encourage artists to, if they want to make money, to learn Photoshop and learn how to do artwork digitally. Even if they're not that talented as an artist, if they have a good eye for art, and a lot of people have a good eye for art, they just can't do it. And that computer becomes their paintbrush where they can create. And so those that have an eye for art, they create beautiful digital stuff. And some of the highest paying jobs there are, and they work for Pixar or Disney or large corporations doing digital art, certainly pays very well. The downside of that, one of my challenges would be that there's a lot of people that have the money to buy a computer and to learn how to do Photoshop that don't have an eye for art or really the talent that they think they do. And I can't afford the digital artist because I need to have artwork digitized from time to time. And I can't afford the guy that works for Disney. I get the guy that thinks he's an artist but can't quite pull it off on the computer. And so I have to babysit him through the process, and it can be quite time consuming to get the results that I want. So I encourage mainly just young people to follow your passion, no matter what it is. A good example would be, I'm sure you might remember little John Butera built chassis back in the 70s, premier race car builder. And his grandson, Max Capps, he liked to ride skateboards. Well, how many billions of kids ride skateboards, right?
Yeah.
But he followed his passion, and he started doing downhill events, and he's become a professional downhill racer, and he traveled to different countries and different events, and may even get involved in the Olympics. So no matter how mundane you think what you do is, follow that passion, because there's some way that you can turn that into a profitable way to make a living. If a kid's interested in sports, likes playing football, how many millions of kids like playing football? Maybe you're not good enough to get on the professional team, but you can go in the sporting goods business or coaching or some aspect of that where you're still following your passion.
Absolutely. Yeah. David Smith, who was a guest here on the show, his son Spencer loves skateboarding and became a world champion. Spencer Smith racing downhill skateboard racing. Gnarly to watch. Oh my gosh. I'm not sure I could stomach that as a parent. And my daughter-in-law is a very professional, very successful illustrator animator. For major corporations, has her own side business as well, and has done very, very well in the field of artwork. She's always working, always honing her craft and practice. So yeah, there's lots of opportunities out there. I'd love to learn a little bit about your passion for cars, because obviously you've loved cars since you were a kid, sitting at that kitchen table. Is there one special vehicle that you've had in your life that stands out that you could share a story about?
Well, I certainly got some stories about my experience drag racing, Mark, if you've got a few minutes.
Well, maybe you could pick one. Sure.
It's a long story, but I had a couple of fuel dragsters, and out of high school, another influential family in my life was the Kaiser family, and I grew up with their son, my age in school, and John Kaiser, and his dad, George, was a motorhead, used to race at lakes and stuff, and he would take us to the races, and I loved cars, but I didn't know anything about them, and he'd buy us old junk cars to work on and things. But he bought us an old 32 Ford Coupe that already had a Chrysler engine in it, and we kind of finished it up and raced that. And then I moved on to racing, building some fuel dragsters. And I don't know, I'll just make a real long story short. My first dragster was pretty crude because I didn't really know that much about the mechanics, and so I'd buy used parts at Blair's Speed Shop, and I got some good parts and some not so good parts, and it had a Chrysler engine on it. It was fuel injected on nitro, and it eventually caught up with me when I had a partner on the car who was the tuner, and he was pretty good, and he got the thing running pretty fast, close to 180 miles an hour. This was back in the day.
Whoa.
We were still smoking the tires. And,
yeah.
But one day, the parts that I put in there that weren't the best fell apart at the rods and pistons. I had the wrong rods and pistons in it, and the car wasn't constructed. It didn't have a motor plate. It just had a piece of tin behind the engine. And back then, believe it or not, fire boots were optional. This was in 65 or so, 64.
Oh, my goodness.
Boots were optional. So I thought, well, I'll save some money and didn't have boots on. And so the engine blew up, and it knocked a piece of tin out from behind the motor, and the fire came right up in the car. It was a slingshot dragster. I had on no boots, and I was burned various parts of my body, but my ankles took the brunt of a third-degree burn, so it was that fire going right up my pant legs.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
As painful as that was, it saved my life, Mark, because just as I was healing up and getting out of bandages, it was 1967, and I got drafted, and it was the height of the Vietnam War, and I would have gone to Vietnam. They wouldn't take me because of the scars on my ankles.
Oh my gosh!
That,
wow!
I wouldn't be able to wear the boots.
Yeah.
And so I know that God didn't want me to go to Vietnam, and those things had to be in place. If I would have had the right rods and pistons, if I would have had a motor plate, if I would have had boots on, I probably would have gone to Vietnam and possibly never come home.
Oh my goodness!
But,
wow. What a story. Well, the other thing that didn't happen was what happened to our mutual Cars Yeah alumni here, Don Garlitz. He didn't lose part of a foot. Of course, what he went through when his dragster blew up on him. Yeah, that's a scary sport. My dad used to take me up to Orange County Raceway in Southern California when Orange County was just orange fields and not full of buildings and houses like it is today, and watched the dragsters run up there. I actually saw him run there, and actually saw Evel Knievel jump over school buses there one time after a drag race, which was kind of cool. So here's a bit of an existential question. I'm a bit of a car psychologist. I'm going to crawl into your head here. If you were manifest as a vehicle, not what you want to be though, this is how you perceive yourself as some sort of vehicle, what would you be and why?
My knee-jerk reaction was, I want to be a slingshot dragster because that's what I love driving. But then, as your question stated, it's not necessarily about what you want. And I thought, you know what? In that case, I believe I'd be a bus or a school bus.
A school bus. Now, why is that?
Where I could take the most amount of people to their desired destination.
Ah, nice. Nice. Well, that's a wonderful segue into my next question, and that's how you help others give back. And you mentioned at the intro here that your counseling services and you help people through that way. Tell us about that. What started that, why you do that, and how you do help people.
Yeah, well, it's a story that amazes me, Mark. I began having supernatural things happen to me when I was just a little boy, when I was 6 years old. In school, I had a vision in my mind one day, and of who my family members really were spiritually, and then would have other supernatural things happen to me growing up and until I was 30 years old, culminating in a really spectacular miracle in my life. And I didn't know from where these things were coming or from who. But because I'm a slow learner, I'd gone to church when I was 13 and accepted the Lord, but I had never put two and two together until I was 30 years old. And the Lord finally actually had to identify himself to me, which he did, and everything came together. And all the things that I had been shown, he then called me to a counseling ministry to share with others. And there are things that you won't hear talked about anyplace else. I teach my foundational class is called God's Secret Formula for Pain-Free Relationships, which is an actual formula that's hidden within the scriptures and that we can apply in relationships. And it's the same formula that God uses in dealing with us. And so I teach that as well as marriage specific. And I teach what I believe is the best parenting class on earth, God's 3 keys to easy parenting, and anger elimination, substance abuse, all kind of things. And that's really my passion and where I want to go here. That's the only thing on my bucket list is to get that out to a worldwide audience via the internet. I've met with thousands of individuals and couples over the years, but I want to make it available and where it's out there and can be out there after I'm gone.
Well, the timing is perfect for that, Kenny, because these days there's things like podcasts and YouTube and all these different channels and ways to get your message out to a massive amount of people that you could never touch. It's a time like we've never had before on this planet. So your timing is very good for being able to do that for people. That's absolutely tremendous. I think most, if not everybody, could benefit from counseling, especially when it comes to parenting, which most people have no clue when those first babies arrive. Nowadays, of course, there's a lot more information, but Is that information good? Is it bad? Is it real? Is it made up? Who knows? But I'll tell you, when I got married, I asked my grandfather, and my grandparents were married for 72 years. And I said, hey, Grandpa, I said, what's the secret to having a happy life? And he said, or a happy marriage. And he said, oh, that's easy. Just do everything she tells you to do. And my grandmother jabbed him in the ribs and said, don't lie to the boy, Bill. And then he got very serious, and he was a joker. He was a farmer from Texas, a true cowboy, rode a horse every day. But then he got serious, and he said something to me I've tried to always remember, and maybe this touches on a little tiny piece of the very complex nature of what you teach people, and that is this. He said, Mark, practice every day to always give more to your spouse than you expect back from her. And if you do that, and if she does that, you'll both have a really good life. And I've been married 39 years now. It seems to have worked pretty well. I'm sure that's just one little bit and piece, but I've always remembered that little bit of advice my grandfather gave me.
That was good advice. He was a wise man.
Yes. Yeah, he was a good man. Very hardworking man, sure. Now, reading. I love books. We love to share books here on Cars Yeah. Is there a great book that you could share that you've really enjoyed, that you think people could glean some great information from, or just a fun book?
Yeah, I'm not really, haven't ever been a big reader. I've read the Bible until the pages, especially the New Testament, are literally falling out of it. I recommend that. But other than that, I'm not a big reader. So I'm going to have to fall short on that one.
Well, I think the Bible is a pretty good reference there. So we'll put that on your show notes page. Many, many people have recommended that great book. Let's go on the ultimate drive. I'm a bit of an enabler, but I'm a great enabler. I'm going to provide you with any vehicle in the world, park it in your driveway, and you can take it on a drive. But here's the fun part. You can take anyone with you, even somebody who's no longer with us, somebody from the past. So what does the ultimate drive look like for you, starting with the vehicle?
Well, the vehicle would have to be the one that I let get away, which was when I was a young man. In my 20s, I bought a 57 Pontiac Safari wagon, which is, like the Nomad, but the Pontiac. And the 57 Pontiacs were really beautiful, those Nomads. And I made it into a mild custom. It was really a beautiful car. And so that would be my ride. I foolishly sold it. Back then. You just don't think that, hey, that car that I paid a few $100 for is worth, $80,000 now, But, so that'd be the car. And gosh, who I would take with me. Oh man, that's a tough one. I certainly enjoy traveling with my wife. I've been blessed with a wonderful lady that, like I said, enjoys motorsports as much or more than me, and we love traveling together. So I guess I just keep taking my wife.
That's the prudent answer for somebody who wants to remain married for a long time. It's a great answer. And I understand your wife worked with Carroll Shelby towards the end of his days, right?
Yes, she did. She went on. It's kind of a unique story. We moved up here to Vegas, and some good friends, Vicki Prock, who was Tom Prock's wife. Tom drove Custom Body Enterprises, funny cars. It is Jimmy Prock, who's Robert Height's car. And Carrie's good friends with Vicki. And then also Lynn Rose was coming up here helping Vicki at Shelby's. Lynn was Terry's boss at one time at Orange County Raceway. Lynn was the assistant manager to Bill Donner, and Terry worked out there. And so they were out at Carroll's, and they called Terry one day and told her that they wanted her to run the restaurant for them. They actually had a small restaurant over by the Speedway for a while, Carroll Shelby Cafe, and it was being mismanaged. And so Terry went to work for him running the restaurant. And ironically, she got it up and making money, doing well. But Carol, who had been in the restaurant business 3 different times, said, I don't want to be in the restaurant business again. Close that dang restaurant. And
yeah.
so they did. And Vicki knew that Terry at the time needed a job. And so she suggested that they hire Terry at the corporate level, which they did. And my wife's really a very intelligent lady, and so she was able to help him out. She was actually director of operations for a while and then was head of HR at Carol's. And so she got to know Carol. That was in his latter years there. She's a very likable gal, and he really loved Terry, and she would take good care of him when he would come up from Los Angeles to the Las Vegas facility. And I got to meet Carol a few times, and so that was a great experience for all of us. He was just an amazing man.
Most definitely. Back to that Pontiac Safari, those things were so cool because of that Nomad style two-door body, but the beautiful wings on the back, and the way that back tailgate slanted forward and the wraparound glass. You don't see those cars hardly at all anymore. You see the Chevy Nomads people talk about, but I think to me the Pontiac was a much cooler looking car.
Yeah, I thought so too, and yeah, they're very rare. Ironically, there's an old timer get-together up here on Sunday morning's breakfast, and one of the car guys there has a 57 Safari that I drool over when I see it. But,
well,
yeah, they were going. The one I had, I painted black, and it had we would spray the top with what would be like bed liner, and to make it look like a vinyl top.
Sure.
We called them tennis shoe tops back then.
I love it.
It had this black faux vinyl top and black, and then I lowered the car. It had chrome reverse wheels with white wall tires on it, and baby moons, and boy, it was really a slick ride. It's silly that the reason I sold it was that a heavy car, and it had the chrome reverse wheels front and rear, and the steering box didn't like swinging those wide front wheels. And one day it started having some slop and making noise in the steering, and so I had my wife. I jacked it up and started up and had her get in the car and turn the steering, and it had snapped the bolts off the steering box completely.
Okay. Yeah.
And I thought, I was working and I had connections in aerospace back then, and I got some 12-point high tensile aircraft bolts and bolted it back to the car. Well,
Nice.
A few months later, started doing the same thing, Mark, and I'm thinking there's no way that it could have broken those high tensile bolts. And so I jacked the car up again, had the wife get in it, got under there, and it had cracked the frame rail in half.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. Yeah, and so I sandwiched it back together, but I thought, I better sell this car, and I did. But boy, I wish I'd have kept it.
Yeah, they're beautiful. Well, you've taken us on a fun ride today, Kenny, and I can't thank you enough for being a guest on the show and sharing what amazing life you've created for yourself. Before I let you go, could you share maybe some words of inspiration, a mantra or success quote for those listening out there?
Well, I'd like to do two things. Can I tell listeners where they can get a hold of us?
Absolutely.
Yeah. The artwork, if you just go to KennyYoungblood.com, got some artworks there and my contact and everything, information and bio and stuff. And then the counseling ministry is alwaysanswer.org. So it's always ANSWER.org. And my advice, well, it would have to be the same as Don Garlett's. And if you've never seen it, my friend Dean Papadeus years ago, Main Event Video, did a film on Don Garlett's called Close Calls, and centering in on his devastating wreck where he lost part of his foot and things. And after that, Don, well, you need to watch the show. If you go to Tubi, and you can go to Main Event and you can open Close Calls. It's free. At the end of the show, Dean asked Don that same question, and he looks the camera in the eye and he says, well, I just recommend that you make Jesus Christ the Lord of your life. Put him number one, and that would be my same best advice I could give.
There you go. I'll put all of these on Kenny's show notes page so you can find everything. I encourage you to check out his website. Check out his artwork. You'll probably recognize many, many things going, I've seen that before. But check it out. And of course, his counseling, always an answer. We can all use a little bit of counseling to improve our lives and those around us. Kenny, thank you for being so generous today with your time and sharing your life with our listeners. Until you and I talk again, my friend, I'll see you down the road.
Thank you, Mark. It's been a Well, it's just so much fun. I so enjoyed it. Hope it was enjoyable to your listeners. And hey, I'll see you again.
Absolutely. This was great. Today's vehicles are essentially computers on wheels, and it takes more than a wrench and oil to keep them humming. That's why Cars Yeah supports TechForce Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to driving tomorrow's workforce of skilled technicians forward. Techs keep our cars, trucks, airplanes, and fleets rolling. Yet there's a massive tech shortage because many young people don't know it's no longer a blue-collar job. Today, it's a new-collar career. It involves computers, technology, it's in high demand, you get paid really well, and you can live and work anywhere in the country. I know you're passionate about cars, trucks, and motorcycles, and you can help pass that passion on to the next generation of techs so our rides keep rolling down the road. Visit techforce.org today and learn how.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's ride here at Cars Yeah. Drive on over to carsyeah.com to find show notes and inspiring automotive fun. Download your free copy of Filler Up, a fun book filled with gorgeous photographs of fuel filler fun, including quotes from more inspiring automotive enthusiasts. Download your copy today, and we'll see you next time on Cars Yeah.